Hi, everybody. I'm Sue Hillyard, and I'm here today with Rav Chahal, and we're continuing our series in up close and personal interviews with our favorite astrologers. And today, our favorite astrologer is Gemini Brett, and we're both really thrilled to have you here.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm seeing it's Astro Coffee, but I'm drinking tea, which should
I'm
cancel
drinking tea
it.
today too.
But it
And I'm
is a
drinking
really
water.
old Chinese tea with a lot of boost. So
Yeah, okay. Mine is black tea with maybe too much boost. Who knows? So Gemini has been very gracious to allow us to look at his chart as we talk about his journey with astrology. So let's dig in. Why don't we start with what drew you to astrology and how does it show in your chart?
I came to astrology rather late in the game. Um, I was in a nodal return actually in 2012. And for me, I came to the planets through plants. So I had found plant medicine work and was just on a path of healing and trying to figure out who I was. And a question I had been asking for months preceding my introduction to astrology is like, what am I? What am I supposed to do? At that point in time, I had graduated from college finally because I stopped school when I was quite young and chased my saxophone around the world. And then I dropped out of being a musician and went back to school and finally graduated when I was like 30. It was my Saturn return, adulting. But I had a job that I didn't dig, and it was just a thing. And series of events and finding some rock bottom led me eventually to my healing path and to a really amazing community of healers and feelers. And Tarot had come to me a few years before astrology, and my sister actually gave me my first deck, which was the Crowley deck, but along with Angelus Arian's The Tarot Handbook, which is about as far from Crowley really as you get. Um, but that was the first time where I had heard terms like the Decans and other things. So before this, I only knew myself to be a Scorpio. And a few folks in my healing circle all recommended in the same week that I receive a reading with Daniel Germario. That was the first astrology reading I received. He's my first teacher as well. And I was on the waiting list for a few weeks. So I read Daniel's The Shamanic Astrology Handbook, and learned a lot about myself in the process. In fact, when we did our reading, I kind of read my chart to him using his style to see if I was integrating it some. And he said, yeah, you're doing really good with this and you should consider studying astrology. And here's a couple of things that you kind of missed. And then he proceeded to tell me a bunch of stuff about myself nobody should know. We've all had that experience, and then we get hooked, right? So this was just before the end of the world in December of 2012, um, where I had already planned to go to Peru. I was actually at Machu Picchu for the December solstice 2012 happening.
Wow.
And for a couple weeks before, I was in the jungles of Peru doing some healing work and some cleanup at a healing center where I also had this new tool to look with a bunch of people who were on their own kind of healing path there, and was looking at charts with them and really realizing that this kind of simple system of modern astrology was really helping me help people help themselves. And I had an event with Jupiter in the skies of Peru while I was there in December of 2012 that really changed my life. And I kind of got my marching orders from Jupiter and started my study like full on after that. I thought I was heading down to Peru to study in a very different type of healing work. But astrology came in and it was just quite clear that this was what I was asking for, and became, as I think it does for many of us, like a language that we can speak many of these kind of mystery traditions that we're called to study through. So that was the name of my first business was More Than Astrology.
Mhm.
And, definitely did not profess any mastery, but I started doing readings like criminally early. Like that just happened very synchronistically, where I was doing trades with dear friends who massage or acupuncture or chefs or whatever, and everybody's like, dude, what do you charge? Like, I have a bunch of people I want to send over here. And so I like have Daniel's book at my side, and just kind of found my way through by doing the work and being in the practice. So I don't know, where is astrology in my chart? I guess it depends on what kind of astrology you ask. um I think my way into astrology has, despite my moniker, been a very scorpionic one, and a path of let's say Scorpio Sun and North Node in the sixth, like transformational practice. I think the Virgo Venus has a ton to do with the way that I came to astrology, through ceremony and through work with earth and ritual. But I think the way that I astrologize is probably much more experienced through the Gemini ascendant and moon and Mercury there, though with Pluto in the kind of creative fifth.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah, I actually also think your Neptune on the seventh house in Sagittarius, you talk about links to the land, just communing with nature and kind of listening to the messages. You talk about Jupiter when it was during the Jupiter transit that this all came about. But then you've got the south node of Uranus on that Neptune. So kind of like I see it as knowledge that there's always been within. There was just a timing to it to come to awareness in your life. Especially in the seventh house, relating the relationship we have with the land, not just like as human beings on this earth, and that kind of commune that you've had with the land and that knowledge that comes through.
Yeah, it's helpful in client work too. Neptune's setting has not been the most joyous experience in relationship realms in my life's journey. Venus square Neptune there as well. But it's obviously helped in my own unfoldment and yeah, my relationship with spirit, land, etc. But it's also, I think, very helpful in sessions. One of the many mantras I have before I enter sessions every day is, let me see the light in them rather than try to bring them to the light. And it feels that Neptune at the descendant has been really helpful in that, trying to feel into like kind of the higher spirit of people. Even when I sit with folks with whom I might, disagree otherwise, like that's not the space when we're in session, right? I'm here to try to see the world through their eyes and yeah, help them.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
And you also do a lot of, well, I have two thoughts coming in. One is that you do a lot of work with Venus and cycles. You just generally in cycles, and then you do a lot of astronomy, astrology, astronomy. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, some of that's like that love for the land, that connection to the ground, having been brought to the planets through the plants. I'm fascinated by the strange schism between the astrology world and the astronomy world these days. I'm not the opinion that astrology and astronomy were once the same thing, which is so often taught. I see astrology as the rainbow bridge between the measurable side of the heavenly happenings, which is astronomy, and the immeasurable, which is correspondences. right? And so a model I often love to share this through is, the musical model where there's noise, right? So something vibrates and it shakes the medium, and we can measure its amplitude and its frequency and do all sorts of things, right? But like noise becomes sound through an experience of the noise, right? And that's immeasurable. So how is this song going to dance you versus dance Rav or dance me? It might pull one of us in and chase the other away, right? That's a very personal thing. And the great high art or sacred science, a sister science to astrology of musical harmony, like might help us understand a little bit, like what's your culture, where do you come from, what are your tendencies, like how are you wired, what kind of scales did you hear growing up, etc. But that might help me understand how this noise will be experienced as sound by Sue versus Rav, right? But really, like the noise is the measurable and the quantity, and the sound is the immeasurable quality in the way that I'm using those terms. And for me, it's the same. Like astronomy is the measurable quantity of the heavenly happenings, where correspondence is the immeasurable quality. And astrology, this high art, this sacred science, is the rainbow bridge that connects the two, right? So I watched Jupiter and Saturn conjoin from Sedona, and they were like this. It's kind of conjunction you want, right? Where they're side by side, and that's the noise. But how does that dance me? And with them meeting, as we know, in December solstice of 2020 in the first degree of tropical Aquarius, well, my son's in the first degree of tropical Scorpio with Uranus. So I might expect that I'm particularly susceptible to that type of activation through its square and the like, right? So like the high art of astrology helps us apply the astronomy, if you will. So one of my devotions is to help astrologers like retrieve a living connection with the breathing sky, to bring that astronomical side back, to in a sense like assist in ending this strange division. And again, like I don't necessarily believe astronomy and astrology is, or astronomy and correspondences are the same thing. I know many wonderful astrologers that don't know anything about the sky and couldn't point to Mars even when Mars is conjunct Regulus or whatever. I also know that they'll be a much better astrologer if they can, because when we develop that experience of the heavenly happenings on the big screen, right, away from these things, and the big screen of the living sky outside, there's just something where the sky starts speaking to you and through you in a different way, right? I feel that probably astronomy was first, and that people on one level, like the sky was the most interesting thing happening at night back in the day. But also really importantly, if you are interested in survival, you're going to need food. So whether you're nomadic or agricultural, you're probably going to learn to follow the cycles, especially those of the sun and the moon, right? And so the calendar systems are born through this work. Some of them are like simple counting systems and interesting mathematical systems, but a lot of our ancient calendar systems are rooted in the astronomy, right? And we can read like even back in Hesiod and sources from other places of when you see the Pleiades rising in the east, it's time to get out there and plant or sow or whatever it may be, right? So like learning the cycles. But I think when you start having a living relationship with the heavens and seeing how the correspondences express, like every time Mars and Jupiter align, something similar is happening on Earth, or just simply like being with the sky and being with those mysteries of the night, especially, right? Like you're going to be more susceptible to some kind of a weirding experience, So I think astrology really came through folks who were actively doing the astronomy work, right? And So it's not my intent or my devotion or dedication, because it would be insane to try to help the modern rationalist white coat scientists, astronomers of our day open their minds and hearts to the truth that correspondences are true. Although I've had some success in doing that accidentally. But it is my intent to help astrologers take back this other side. Because actually, what people are calling astrology, that's correspondences. And that's only one side of this rainbow bridge that astrology is, with astronomy, the measurable side being the other. And one of the ways that I like to do this, because, for me in my own practice and attempt to grow, it's getting out of the mind alone and bringing things more into the body, right? So the heart can be there in the center of those two. So finding more experiential ways to bring the astrology out of the brain. And so I do this not only by helping people connect to, well, number in time and space, as astronomy was once called, but also in the other sacred sciences, once known as the Quadrivium. So number in time is harmony, so vibrations, frequencies, and we can get that in our cycles, but we can really hear that and experience that through music, right? And then number in space is the geometry. It's like a scary word for people who have nightmares from middle school or whatever, but so sacred geometry lands better for most, right? But like, that's also, of course, in our work. So the trines and the squares, right? And you might learn that a trine is this and a square is this, but when you're actually like drawing that at the launch pad, as I like to call it, right? And like creating these shapes and understanding how the 12-spoked wheel of the zodiac is born, right, through the seed of life and the like so much happens for you. And then number itself, right, which in the day they called arithmetic. Like these days we think of number like it's just this mathematical, brainy, quantity-based 1 + 1 = 2 thing. We brought our baby to the steam trains up the hill the other day, and this girl we overheard, she's like, 1 + 1 is 2, and 2 + 2 is 4, and 3 + 3 is 6, and I know everything. It was awesome. And I was like, I love that. And what is oneness? Right? Because like, what if we encourage the kids to contemplate oneness before we taught them that 1 + 1 is 2? And we tuned into that truth that numbers have not only quantity, which is incredibly useful and measurable, right, but quality as well, right? And so my intention and the way that I'm trying to share the types of, I guess, protocols that I've stumbled through in my own attempts to crack open the door to the mysteries, and more kind of embodied approach through the sacred sciences of number and quadrivium and music and geometry and the astronomy. It's really to get into a more experiential, embodied, sensual relationship with the astrological craft. So we're kind of resisting that memorize, regurgitate, rinse, and repeat thing of the programming of scholastic systems these days. But astrology is never going to live that way, because she's such a living goddess, right? And there's, you start understanding the art of combining this aspect and that, and like seeing how all of these notes in our sacred songs are themselves in relationship to other notes, and there's chords and harmonies in the heavenly spheres, and the way the archetypes come through. And as we know, astrology really helps kind of initiate us into the language of the birds, as it was once referred, into the symbolic world, and helps us get out of that space of like the calculating mind alone, which is not that's a happy place for me. Like I'm a mathematician and a scientist and those kinds of things, which is why for me, it probably took so long for me to create a field that was ready for, the heavenly rains of astrology to water. Because there was so much programming of this is just archaic, superstitious nonsense in school. And so I just never even took a peek until later in life. Astrology came to me when I was ready.
Awesome.
That's fascinating. I'm sensing a storyteller. It's like, a magical storyteller. Because
Absolutely.
you mentioned that you came out of education quite early on first, right? Did
Well,
you
yeah,
get
I went to
school?
college, didn't know
Okay.
what I would study,
Okay.
and really, though I was like a great student, come my junior year, my parents divorced. In reflection, that was a lot bigger of a deal for me than I thought at the time. Like I was rooting for it at the time. They had separated a bunch, but like, something divorced in me. And simultaneously, like, psychedelic adventures led me to my first fish show in
Yeah.
'93. It's right around the time of my first Saros return. The eclipse family of my prenatal eclipse came around again, and I saw that band, and I was like, wait, I could just like take psychedelics and play music for a career. It's like that's good, and so that's what I did for a long time. So yeah, I chose to go to the University of Colorado Boulder because I knew it would be a really cool place to start a band.
Mhm.
And that was the plan, and that's what happened. And then we were young and touring around mostly the United States, but some out of the States as well for years of my life, trying to not grow up and
Wow.
succeeding very well at that. But at some point, it was like, what big thing for me, and we'll kind of get to this because it's a chart that you chose, was I played with great musicians. Many of them are very well known now, and I'm a good musician. And so it was, the bigger the band got, the smaller I got, because it was really clear for me to see that I was like holding us back. And I'm hard on myself like that. And instead of like doing the work to perfect that craft, it just, I knew that wasn't me. And that, fortunately, I asked this question like, what am I genius at? Like, what am I as good at as these guys are music? And I had no idea that the answer would be astrology. I would have scoffed at that before. I knew it would be mathematical. Maybe I should take my mom's advice. She always said I should go to engineering school. So it's like maybe I should do that. I was also sick of being a broke musician traveling around in vans that were blowing up and stuff. Um, so I went back to school. I was like, it's like, well, it's something I can make a little money. So I started studying computer programming
Mm.
at community college. This is like 2000, 2001. Um, and I remember the teacher said, yeah, and send this assignment in as an attachment. And I asked the girl next to me, I was like, what's an attachment? She's like, dude, you need a different track. Right? It's like, computers are not for you. We were like touring musicians, like we didn't even have a computer. So yeah, then eventually I did end up graduating from engineering school, but I feel very blessed. Shortly before I did, I had this experience at the University of Washington in Seattle, where I was at the time, where on a kind of rainy-ish night, as often is the case in those climes, that I was staring at this street lamp. It's kind of beautiful, old-looking street lamp um, on the University of Washington campus. And just in the mist, I had this vision of what in physics we call a force body diagram, where you draw an arrow pointing down, which is the gravity, and there's an arrow this way for the pole that's hanging the mass of the light up, and yada yada, right? And I like saw this in the world, and I was like, oh my God, I'm like forcing my consciousness into this like materialistic view where everything is just math and physics and arrows. And I was like, I got to get out of here, right? So shortly before I graduated, I kind of had that experience that helped me know that I should find like a job where I could, use that degree, but also not get kind of trapped in that mindset. I was still very heart set on being a musician and playing music, and really had no idea like what I should do besides like utilize my talents, which, it's arrogant to say, but known myself to be the best mathematician in the room. So like, why not go do that? And actually, I love mathematics. Like in a sense, that was like my first psychedelic experience. Just like calculus can take you to a whole other world if you'll go there. And there's no words to explain that. But the applied mathematics, the engineering, just come to hear that, like, it's fun to think of astrology as applied astronomy. It kind of is. It's not only that, but that stuff wasn't for me as much. And I'm like this because I'm a storyteller. I call myself a storyteller. So sometimes we take circles to try to get to a destination rather than walking on a line. But I'll just share this. I am often heard saying that astrology is so much more than some symbolic language alone. Astrology is the poetic breath of nature. And when we read nature, our astrology, by reconnecting to the mysteries of the living sky, we will remember the roots of the rules and the proofs of the astrological equations we use. Now, I used to say astrology is not some symbolic language, it's that other stuff. But I've come to say astrology is so much more than some symbolic language alone, because there's plenty of things I do astrologically that I've realized are just completely symbolic. Learning about annual profections was a thing that completely changed my astrology, changed my worldview, challenged my cosmology, because I see that they work. And I prefer a transit or something I can like point to in the sky, right? Because I'm kind of a materialist in that way. But there's so many things that I utilize as an astrological practitioner, and I see that they totally work, like profections or symbolic directions in one way or another. I mean, even dispositorship, right? Like there's so much in our craft that's completely astronomical and harmonic and geometric and other things that I was applauding before. But there's a lot of stuff that is just interestingly embedded in some mysterious code that we could never necessarily justify, right, rationally. And I love that. The sacred in me loves that. The scientist in me does not.
You have such a way with words. I just, you've sent me down a number of rabbit holes with you've done a number of talks for EA Zoom meetings, and every time I'm just mind blown, and I could listen to you, and be in awe of what you have to say. It's just I'm really impressed.
It might just be the words, though.
But it might be.
I've had this experience a couple of times where I'm doing talks. I used to, instead of speaking at astrology groups or conferences, which I love, it used to be me sitting at the floor of the yoga spot, like a community of folks who were starting to have their own awakening experience. And so there were a couple of times after lectures where it was like, man, I had no idea what you were talking about, but I couldn't stop watching because you're so into it. That's like, I think that's a compliment. But I should probably start working on the translation piece too.
Thank you, I think.
Mhm.
Well, and maybe it's the Gemini part, but it's backed up by the Scorpio part. So
Mm.
I mean, it's very clear that you're going very deep, and really thinking about what it is you're saying. I mean, I mean, to go back to your chart, um, the let's see, yeah, this is yeah, your Gemini moon is ruled by that Mercury in Libra, and you're seeing all of the different possibilities of things, but then you've got the Sun Uranus conjunction that is just bringing all of this information from way down deep and past, and and everywhere, and you just it's amazing.
Yeah, and I'm a heretic on Uranus, right?
Right, exactly. Exactly. And so what we were talking about, or what you started to talk about, was that I chose this progressions particular time because I noticed that your Mercury, which had progressed into Scorpio at this particular point in time, conjoined the North Node in Scorpio at the same time that your Venus had just separated from Pluto. And so you kind of alluded to being in school at the time or graduating. Was that about the time you graduated or?
Oh no, no, no. That's like when I went back to school.
Oh,
My
okay.
band split up in December of 2000. And
Okay.
so I moved back in with mommy, um, which was interesting. At that time, I was 25 years old and was like working as a valet at the hotel down the road, and then
Uh,
started community college. My mom at that time lived in Monterey, and so I went to Monterey Peninsula College for a semester, and then I was off to Santa Cruz and studied at Cabrillo College, which
ah,
is a community college there. Yeah, so it was interesting to me that like this time spoke to you, Sue, when you sent that chart. I was like, that's intriguing.
yeah.
Yeah, and there's some things that actually I feel would also be clear if we showed this progressed chart, secondary progressed chart wrapped around my nativity. So, for example, that moon, which, I know that's pretty close to your own moon,
It is.
right? That moon's very close to my ascendant, which is 936 Gemini. So I was having moon come through. But I mean, if we rewind this some months, we're going to find a full moon at the nodes. What does that mean?
Hmm.
It was a total lunar eclipse.
Right.
Something
Yeah.
I saw looking at the two of your charts that we're all born in eclipse seasons. Rob, a little closer to you and myself, Sue, but I was born 10 days before a solar eclipse and about 25 days before a total lunar eclipse. So, of course, in secondary progressions, where we oddly turn days into years, who would
Yeah.
have thought that could work, right? That caught up to me around 25 years old. And so the band was kind of eclipsed in a way. I started this next half of this lunation, this progressed lunation, which cycled some years ago. So I think that was a very pivotal thing. But this was a very important time in my life as well. Um, 9/11, was,
Mhm.
I,
Oh, right.
it was
Yeah.
very kind of Scorpio fashion that helped me break out of consensus reality. Um, and I was driving to that Cabrillo College for my computer science class, where I would later be told I should have a new track by the neighbor who sat next to me in class. When the first tower was struck, I heard that on the radio,
Mm.
And when I got to class that day, the second plane hit, and then we were all like excused to go home and deal with it. And I was living with a bunch of women, some of them also students. I don't know, it's just a few months that I was in Santa Cruz, and we all watched, George Bush that night declare war on a thing, and the "you're with us or against us" and all that. And I wanted to, like, I was like, there was something wrong about it, and I felt that, just immediately. And I have a very engineering kind of mind, so watching some of that stuff, it was like something's off here. And then even getting news like somehow a passport fell from a plane explosion and landed safely on the streets, so that somebody, I was like, some of this isn't right. But I also, like, I wasn't ready. I didn't have like the courage to like look a little deeper into that at the time. So months later, I kind of tried to see again. It didn't happen. Then years later, and then finally, like, I think the third time I tried to approach that years later, it really is. There's two things. One, that event from 2001. The other, later, hearing about Paul McCartney dying and being replaced by an imposter, and the whole Paul is dead phenomena, which I was like shocked to not have heard of before this time in my life. That was later. That was like 2006, 7 probably. Those are like the two weird things that were whispering of a hidden world to me that really seeded my awakening experience. So I was intrigued that you chose this chart, because really, if I had to kind of point to an event that was maybe the most important catalyst for my own corruption outside of the cult of our culture, it would probably be the 9/11 event. And the other thing I often speak about that was really important to me that happened at Cabrillo, was that I just walked past a sign that said tutors were needed at the tutoring center there. And I was like, man, I need some money and I'm good at math, and why don't I go do that? And mostly I was tutoring. I would say there's a funny thing here. It's kind of an aside, but the woman who ran the tutoring center at Cabrillo College, at least at that time, was very sensitive to scents. So there were a bunch of signs up of no perfumes and colognes, and I thought that was like ridiculous at the time. I've become one of those people. I've become many of the things that I've ridiculed in my life.
Yeah, I hear you, brother.
But anyway, like that, looking back on that, I realize it's the first time that I've been engaged as a professional healer. Like, that wasn't the job, but mostly I was sitting with adults who at some time in life believed some terrible teacher that they were not smart enough to crack a particular code.
Right.
There was one woman in particular, I'm not going to name her name, but I'll never forget it. She just couldn't deal with negative numbers. She just couldn't do it. And look, negative numbers, probably because she's like wise. Because what the fuck is a negative number? Pardon my language, right?
No worries.
Like, show me a negative number, right? Like, in fact, show me 0. Anyway, look at your keyboard. You're going to see it starts with 1 and 0's on the other side, because everything starts with oneness, right? But like in our cult, like 0 has now made its way to the beginning of the number line. So we start with nothing. And in fact, if you want to balance that, you need negative numbers. So we start in debt. Welcome to the world. Anyway, so this particular woman, she just couldn't deal with negative numbers, and it took months for me to find out how to communicate that to her. So as we know as counselors, so much of this has to do with know what to say, know what not to say, without judgment, but some folks aren't ready to hear that one yet, and you want to hear it from them. right? That's when there's medicine in the room, right? And know what not to say. Some things must be said, but how to say them based upon who we're saying it to. And that brings us back to know what to say, right? And so this was, I think, my first experience of really trying to and needing to develop consideration to the point where I had to like understand how to communicate negative numbers to this woman, right? Not the way that it's supposed to be taught. Like that wasn't working, right? Not my way, right? Her way. And this is Libra stuff, right? So this is like, the golden rule is nonsense. Do unto others as you would have done unto you is completely narcissistic, right? Anybody who's been in a long-term partnership understands you don't buy the present for your partner that you would want. That's not going to get you far. The whole, the platinum rule is do unto others as they would have done unto them. Right. And we're all speaking foreign languages. Even if we're all speaking English, we speak it in a different way. We have different needs. We have different charts. Right. And so like trying to communicate what I need to my partner in her language, or trying to communicate to this woman how negative numbers work in her math. Right. And anyway, and it worked. And she broke through and she just sobbed, because you could feel, and she wasn't the only one that I got to work with at that particular place who I could see we just got back to that moment where she convinced herself she was stupid. And we broke that. Like, I cry every time I think about this. It's like one of the most powerful experiences of my life. And she wrote this like 2-sentence thank you card that just changed me. I mean, I've always been some of this because of needing to be there for my mother emotionally when my father was not, or when, different things were happening where she was really hurt in her marriage when I was super young, like I've always been somebody who others tell their story to, like in the checkout line at the grocery store. That's probably true for most of us, we're empathic, a lot of that often comes through developing the like extrasensory perception of walking on eggshells in a childhood.
Yeah.
There's a lot of tension, most mystics have an strange experience with at least one of their parents, right? It's like that helps open up, the stuff that lives outside of like think alone, right? But it really, like looking back at this time, it is very likely the first time where I was engaged professionally that was not the job title as a healer. It also led, by the way, like later I moved up to Seattle just months after this. What is cast for September 26th, right? So very shortly after 9/11, of course. I moved to Seattle in December of that year, and started at North Seattle Community College to gain residency, and then later transferred to the University of Washington, which I did. And I lived with my sister, who I love. And there they had a tutoring center too. So I went and I applied and got a job because I had to put myself back through school, right? And a kid there was like, did you fill out your FAFSA? And I was like, what's a FAFSA, right? And so that's a form that you fill out to get like government grants to help pay for tuition. And he's like, dude, how old are you? I was like 26 at the time, right? And he's like, dude, the government will pay for you to go to school, which is basically what happened. I ended up getting an engineering degree for the University of Washington with very little debt, which most students can't say. So like, it was like, there was a really weird thing, and then eventual path of synchronicities where that Cabrillo College, just by walking by this tutors needed sign at a time where I needed a job, really opened up a huge thing in my life. I then later, when I was putting myself through college, I tutored mostly high school kids. And that's like, that job is motivating people to play the game, right? It's like, I understand why you hate this. I understand why you don't want to do trigonometry, right? But this is why it might be interesting to learn what you love. Um, and so for a time, actually, in ceremony work, where I was starting to ask, like, yo, what am I meant to be? Um, One thing that came through was like maybe it's like tutoring. So this vision came in of a company called More Than a Tutor,
Mm.
which was like helping people like, you know, become better human beings at a young age. And so then when all these different synchronicities happened and astrology kind of came in really quickly for me, that's where More Than Astrology was already like ready for me. So
Wow.
I can't remember what the question was, but hopefully that was a lot of
Me
answers to
neither,
the
and
question.
it doesn't matter. But while you were talking, I'm looking at little things in the chart, and the one thing that just kept popping up to me was, and the part of the reason that I chose this progression chart was that in addition to the uh, Venus, Pluto, and the Mercury North Node, your Mars was had turned retrograde shortly before, I mean, a few years before that, probably, right? And what I noticed was that not only was it retrograde, but it was also increasingly out of bounds.
And
So
continues to be, by the way.
does it? Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
my Mars will. So Mars stationed retrograde 11 days after my birth. So
Okay.
11
Yeah,
years in the
correct.
secondary chart. Mars, I was actually inspired to look because you mentioned that. Um, and I found that it's going to be 2032 when Mars stops increasing
Wow.
in northern declination. Yeah, so he was on like one of these kind of crazy loops, and that has a lot to do with where a planet is in respect to its geocentric node,
Mhm.
which is like a long tail,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, the planets they make different retrograde shapes depending on where they loop in respect to their geocentric nodes, which is obviously a huge part of your interest. So I was interested in just see all these planetary nodes drawn on the charts. I didn't know that that was a fascination of yours or a science or study of yours. But yeah, like depending on where a planet does its retrograde thing, in respect to its own planetary nodes. From Earth's point of view, the geocentric nodes, that will determine its type of shape. So sometimes they'll do something like this, sometimes they'll do this big one like that. And it's those big loops that take them on this great dance of latitude, like distance from the ecliptic. Right, and when you're doing that, where the ecliptic itself is so distanced from the equator, meaning the solstice degrees, like you're way more likely to have a super out of bounds journey. So yeah, I'm born, Mars is out of bounds in my nativity, but shortly after my birth stationed retrograde and then went more and more and more out of bounds. And then yeah, it's 2032. I got to find out thanks to you
Yeah, yeah.
and some software that
Yes,
my
serious
Mars
software.
will peak in max declination.
Wow. Yeah, and
Only
so
getting weirder.
and that's okay. I mean, you're what kind of connected it was traditionally Mars rules Scorpio. So, to see that the Mar I mean the Mercury, with all of your Gemini, with the North Node of the Moon, and then Mars in Cancer, and your Gemini Moon, it's like interweave all of these things, and I just, it just seemed like a perfect point in time.
What brought you to that chart, Sue, though? What were you looking for in my
Mm.
nativity? Were you wondering when Venus caught up with Pluto or when Mercury got to the node
I
or
think
what?
it was, I was because of your Gemini. I was looking. I noticed that Mercury had moved, and so I yeah I what I picked. I first I picked the Venus Pluto, and then I thought, well, look, the Mercury gets to the North Node. Just I mean, might have even been months after that. So I just chose this one.
Yeah. What were you wondering about with Venus Pluto?
Well, I mean that's a um, I mean,
Something.
well, in evolutionary astrology, Pluto is, pretty prominent, and Venus, relational and other and things like that. And it just seemed like I think it was the whole story that I was seeing was like it
Mhm.
was like a culmination. It was like a moment in time where a lot of things were happening.
But Sue, that Venus would have been, conjuncting, of course, natal Pluto, but also Mercury in the natal chart. So it
Yeah.
kind of would have been in the middle
Oh,
between those two at that particular point
oh,
in
right. Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah. So you've got that whole energy of, Mercury in Libra, what are you listening to? Who are you listening to? Are you listening to others? What messages are coming through from others? How is relating to your value systems? Are your value systems adjusting? Are you adapting to others more than yourself kind of thing? Those kind of energies playing around at that particular point in time in terms of why you've picked that chart, I feel, you know.
Yeah,
So you're
and
very intuitive. You tend to pick the charts that we need to know about or go back
I
to.
yes, I do. I do. I think it is an intuitive thing that I
Mhm.
just see, oh wow, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
However, I don't have a lot of times I can't express, what it is that I see, and that's why Brava's so good. She's certified evolutionary astrologer, and she has the words. So
Oh
um,
God. So you make me sound so amazing.
well, you are.
Um, that's why we work well together with Astro Coffee. Yeah.
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 Okay, let's see.
So So
Did
that
you?
just that particular point in time, you might jog a memory. Yes, you explain exactly what happened at that point, but it was sort of like your value systems coming to the forefront. You explained about happened at September the 11th and what you were feeling, though that couldn't be expressed at that time. That strong emotional memory that ends up being imprinted for the rest of your life, kind of thing, that conditions it, those kind of moments. And we can only look back in hindsight and join the dots together,
Yeah.
with those particular like transits and stuff, especially with the progressions. And I know Sue uses a lot more progressions than I tend to look at. I just tend to be simple birth chart and transits, because I like to just keep it a little bit simple, even when working with people's charts or clients. But progressions can just add a little bit more of the story and explain why something may have transpired at that time. So it's kind of good to look back.
Yeah, I mean, another time to look to is when that Mercury caught up to the sun.
Mm.
It's
Mm.
hard to see this in my nativity because we learned that Mercury's maximum elongation is 28 degrees. Will you go back to my natal chart, Sue?
Sure.
So I didn't learn this until years after I was practicing astrology, and I learned how to see Mercury's maximum elongation through planetary speed. So for anybody who's doing this at home, for Mercury and Venus, because their orbital paths live between Earth and the Sun, they can never get too far from the Sun from Earth's point of view. Like if you are Earth and my face is the Sun, they're doing this Mercury or this Venus, right? And Mercury can
Mm.
never get more than 28 degrees away from the Sun, and Venus 48. But that doesn't mean Mercury does that every cycle.
Yeah.
So I have Mercury, as you can see, is only 18 degrees from the sun. I was born like in the moments of Mercury's maximum elongation
Wow.
as
Okay.
a morning star. Um, and the way that Libra rises, it makes that distance actually quite visible for Mercury too. Obviously not where I was born, where they were buried underneath the ground with the sun. So this is a time where the ancients would say Mercury saturates the chart.
Mm. Mm.
Which, Gemini rising, like it's already happening anyway, but you can
Right.
very much hear the mercurial in me. Um, but so the time when Mercury then changed phase through the Cazimi, right, conjoining the sun and then moving towards the western star side of the sun, that was also a huge time in my life. That's where the tarot came in, plant medicine came in, eventually astrology came in. So that's like in progressions, October of 2010. And I met the medicine in July of 2011, which just significantly changed everything for me. So yeah, I spend time with secondary progressions. I don't spend time with my own chart much or enough.
Mm.
But it was cool to just like go take a peek this morning, Sue, because I saw you were like looking at that chart. I was like, oh, it's interesting, and I wonder when Mars does this and whatever. And I was just seeing that my progressed Mercury is going to change signs this year, and Moon and yada yada. So thanks for the inspiration.
Well, it's mutual inspiration because I mean, like I said, you have. I remember especially one talk that you did about Saros cycles, and
Mm.
I mean, I just dove into that one and just started. I mean, and all of the things that I came up with, it was just incredible.
It's the
Uh,
most amazing. Yeah, the 1819s, I've become a significant theoretician and practitioner of what I call nodal return windows.
yeah,
And this is like fun to actually bring to the EA Zoom space because obviously very few astrologies honor the significations of the lunar nodes more than evolutionary astrology does, right?
yeah.
And still, like when I ask folks, like, how long does a nodal return last? Like, well, let me ask you, what's your answer to that question?
How long does a nodal
How long
return
does it
last?
last?
Yeah, this is what you
Really?
get, right? So it's like interestingly, it's like not part of the teachings,
Yeah. Well,
right?
I'm
So
in one right now.
Me
you're
too.
in the 54 to 57, and Rob, you're in the 36 to 38. Yeah. The Triceros, I feel, Sue, might be the most interesting one. Um, Here, put that chart away and we'll just wrap for a second. Um, so, when we look at a Saturn return or Saturn transiting Venus or whatever, like you're either going to get one or three alignments, right?
Yeah.
I don't like to say hits, by the way. The
Yeah,
only time I'll say that is right then. I think you're inviting something really silly when you use terms like that in astrology.
I
So I'll
agree.
say
Yeah.
activations, maybe initiations. So that's a pretty loaded word for some. It depends on who you're speaking with, right? So anyway, you won't hear me say that H word. But so Saturn will visit, let's say it's like you have Venus in 28 Pisces right now as we're sharing this in July of 2025, and Saturn's just moved into Aries, but we'll head back into Pisces for some unfinished business, right? So Saturn will come across three times, direct, retrograde, direct, or only one. But if Saturn only passes one time, he's either going to station retrograde very close to the point, or later after the exact alignment station direct very close to the point, right? And if you take that close to the exact, or the exact to the close to, you get 9 months, which you get if Saturn does 3. So it's very easy, like to kind of determine the general period of a Saturn transit,
Yeah.
or a Jupiter transit, or Uranus, Pluto, whatever, right? Pluto 3 or 5, but if you play this game of getting close, you still get in this same kind of 20-month process, right? In many ways, to pet the cosmic cat, many astrologers kind of do orbs, and it's turned on and off and on again and on. Like, I'm kind of an equal opportunity astrologer when it comes to transit timing, right? So anyway, with the nodes, they tend to just come by and move along their merry draconic way, right? And so you get like one touch and then they move forward. So Daniel Jamario, my first teacher, initially, he was like, oh no, add 3 months before, 3 months after. Because the eclipse seasons are 6 months-ish, between this one and the next one. Or maybe 6 months before and 6 months after. So they're like year-long processes when the nodes return every 18.6 years, or when they reverse. The interesting, like, this was one of the reaches back into the Tarot mysteries, because I found it fascinating that the nodes have an 18.6 year transit of the zodiac, and in the Tarot the moon card is 18 and the sun card is 19.
I love that. I
right
love that.
And it's like, oh well, there's something in that.
Yeah.
And in the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School, I had also learned about the importance of the 19, the Metonic returns, right?
Right. And those are huge.
They're huge and they're amazing, right?
Yeah.
Like, just the fact that these, like, I don't know if snaps will happen because of Zoom cancellation and whatever, but like, if we look at 2 and 3, like, we can hear where those polyrhythms like reunite, right? Or if you asked me about 3 and 4, I'm like 12, right? Like, it's astrology. If you asked me, like, what is the key to the synchronizations of 29 and a half days, that's a lunation, and 365 and a quarter days, which is the solar year, I can't snap that. And you would think it might never happen. But amazingly it does, right? So every 19 years is almost exactly equal to 235 lunations. And I remember that, by the way, because 19 is the sun card, and the 23.5 degree tilt angle gives you your 235, right? Anyway, I can go on and on like that. But what is the 18? And that ends up being the eclipse families, right? So it's really 18.03 years, or 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours between, as I like to describe it, like subsequent beats of the dragon's heart. So,
I
right,
love that.
your prenatal eclipse, or I mean, for the three of us, postnatal eclipse is kind of just as, if not more interesting, because we're all born close to when an eclipse is about to happen. Rav, you might be born between eclipses. That's probably true for you, right? Yeah.
I think it's between eclipses from what I recall, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like you said, you don't tend to look at your own chart as much. Like,
Yeah.
you learn astrology, you help other people and stuff. Like being a twin, my twin sister would be like, so tell me something. And I'm like, go to somebody else. Like, because I'm
Oh,
literally,
that's a good idea.
you
When
know
it's
what I
that
mean? It's
close
just
to
like,
home.
you're way too close to home. But yeah, I think
How
I only
far apart are you in your birth times?
5 minutes, and the biggest difference is Jupiter. Hers goes is the end of the 11th house. Mine is into the 12th house. Because I use the Propri house system,
Uh-huh.
and that's worked for me. And that seems to be very true in our life journey, from what she's experienced in her life and what I've experienced in my own life.
Who's older?
That Jupiter, me technically, how she acts it.
Well, you know what's interesting is, like, so I've become a huge fan of primary directions,
Okay.
and she'll direct through the bounds before you do.
Mhm.
And that's kind of a long story where we'd want to show some charts and stuff, but that's a kind of an intriguing thing to explore in twins, especially with 5 minutes between you, which is not a short amount of time when it comes to that technique, because 4 minutes equals 1 year of life. And so she'll experience things a year before you.
Oh,
And
wow.
we look at what we call circumambulations through the bounds, and that's some old Hellenistic stuff. Anyway, the 18 years, the 18 card, the moon card, like this is Saros. And the Saros is 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. So like an amazing thing about eclipse families is that 11 days brings them spiraling through the zodiac, right? And then the 8 hours is a third of a day. So this is, Sue, why the third one is so intriguing, because the prenatal eclipse would have shadowed like particular places on Earth. When it comes around, that same family of eclipses comes around 18 years later, 18 years, 11 days. And then the 8 hours means it's going to be like a third of the way around the globe. And then the second one, another third of the way around the globe. And then third one, another third, and
Right,
three-thirds
back
the
to
whole, right?
back to
So,
zero.
right. Yeah. So before our 54th solar return, or depending how close you're born to your prenatal eclipse, it can then like kind of pass your solar return. But like around 54, our prenatal eclipse is going to come back and shadow the same places of Earth where it did before our birth. So if you live unless you live to 108, which is an amazing eclipse number in and of itself,
I'm
like
hoping to.
right on, to each their own.
Yeah,
Like
right.
54 will be kind of like the closest that you realign. And as I said, like there was such an important time in my life of my parents splitting up and those kinds of things. I can't even remember why we were there, but the fish show. So
Yeah.
that fish show I mentioned, it was at Laguna Seca Days on the racetrack in
Oh, yeah.
Monterey. Um, my prenatal eclipse family, I was born 10 days before an eclipse. So my prenatal eclipse is almost 6 months before my birth. In May, I was born in October. That eclipse family came around when I was 17 and a half years old. It was actually visible in California.
Wow.
I don't think I saw, or I don't know if I saw it or not. I don't think so. But then I went to that fish show like a week later, the
Wow.
Memorial Day, and it completely changed my life. And then the next time I had a nodal return window, as I call them, and I see them as these 18, 19s. So the second time, 36, 38. The next time 54, 57, right? Because you get your Saros, the nodal return, and then the metonic return. These are all sun, moon, earth phenomena, right?
Wow.
Where they widen the fourth time 72 to 76, 90 to 95.
Yeah, well, I'm on the next one.
Where are you?
I'll be 75 in a
Oh,
couple months.
well, you seem at least 19 years younger.
Yeah,
But
right.
in wisdom, you seem at least 190 lifetimes greater. Anyway, my bad. So, yeah, they're intriguing to look at. And so this like sun, moon, earth theory that kind of shows as we grow, every time the nodes return, the window widens. I find them to be like really important times of kind of realigning to path and purpose. I'm biased because I found astrology in my second one.
Mhm.
But interesting, and you can see it in my prenatal eclipse chart, like both times it was like a psychedelic community experience that led to a complete sea change in the way that I work and show up in life. Like one committing to professional musician, playing weird jazz music on the jam band scene. And then the next time, like coming to astrology, which is even a weirder jam band scene in some regards, right? Who knows what's going
And
to
here
happen
we
to me?
are.
54 to 57 is coming pretty soon for me. So like, I wonder what's going to happen. It won't
Yeah.
be psychedelics because like plant medicine got me sober, which was not my intention with it, but that's been 13 years now or something. Um, but yeah, Rob, do you see, what's your age now?
How old am I? 40. I'm going to be 46 in
Oh, so
September.
you're in a nodal reversal time.
Yes, sorry,
Yeah.
yeah. No,
Yeah,
that's
got
right.
it. And my feeling is in the nodal reversals, they would start wide, like 5 years around our first one at 9.3 years old, and then they would
Yeah.
narrow, right? So like
Mm.
the reversal, the nodal reversals are kind of more south nodey, and nodal returns are more north nodey, if I'm using kind of
Okay.
the EA perspective
Yeah,
of
makes
moving
sense.
towards north node. So like the reversal's kind of the window is closing where the return window opens, right? Like this Taurus. So that's the theory. And I synchronistically, or because this is in my heart and I see it works, I sit with a lot of people, clients who are in those windows. And I'll always go back and look, okay, what was it like for you at 18 and 19, 36, 38, 54, 57? Like, were there similar themes? And then we can look at the prenatal eclipse, and oftentimes they're described there.
Wow.
Rob, let's see where you were born, the eclipses. Can you put your chart on the screen?
Sue,
I
I think it's the last slide, right? So you've put it up.
oh yeah, I can do that.
I was gonna say, Gemini, if you decide to do a test with twins, I'm pretty sure my sister will be the first one to sign up. So we'll be there.
But what about you?
No, but twins, and in terms of all the nodal axes and who experiences what when, and the time difference
Yeah,
and
it's
stuff.
a great challenge to astrology, isn't it? That we
Yeah,
feel
it is.
like, your birth chart, your blueprint, and nobody else has it. Well, Pav and Rav are here to disagree. But then it's like, do you get some of it and she gets the other? Do you get the light side of something and she gets the shadow version of it? Can you kind of switch that? Can you hold them at the same time? Like, I think it's a really great and interesting
Yeah.
challenge. Yeah, so of course, the way to know if we're born in eclipse season is sun node, right? So the
Right.
draconic year, like sun north node back to sun north node, is 354 days, and we have eclipse seasons, not when the moon is at the node, when the sun is at the node, because then the new moons and the full moons are at the nodes, right? So we all have this. Like, my sun is further out. My sun is at 1 Scorpio, and my node's at 21 Scorpio, so it's going to be a bit for me. For Sue,
Yeah.
where are you? The 11 Virgo sun and the node at 28, so like 18 degrees away. But it's all about the phase of the moon, and Sue's born at the closing square, right? So you're a week before new moon, which means the sun will move like a week, about 7 degrees. So there's going to be a new moon at 18 degrees Virgo after your birth, and that's close enough to that node to be it's close enough to be a total solar eclipse. Is Lilith on this chart? No, so
It's not
I
on this
can't
one.
tell.
Yeah.
I can't tell unless I see Lilith, because that'll tell me if it's total or annular or partial. But for you, Rav, like, the sun has already passed the node, right?
Yes.
And you're
Yeah.
born with the moon waxing.
Yes.
So shortly after your birth, like, we see the moon here waxing away. She's sesquiquadrate the sun. Have you played that game yet?
I have.
All right, so 135 degrees. And a fun thing is the sun moves like 1 degree per day and the moon like 13. So the difference between them is 12. So if you look at the difference between 135 and 80, which is 45, and divide that by 12, which is like about 4, you're born 4 days before full moon. And the sun moves 1 degree per day, so it's going to be a full moon at like 14 degrees Pisces. Within 6 degrees of that node, that's a total lunar eclipse. But if we go back in time from there, I think it would have been the last degree of Leo on Regulus, your prenatal solar eclipse. And within 10 degrees of that node, again, I'd have to see Lilith, but I think you were born.
Lilith is 13 degrees of Virgo.
That's
Okay,
that
so that
asteroid
means,
or black moon.
Natural Lilith.
yeah,
Astrology.
so that means it
Astrology.
was an annular solar eclipse, because when the moon is with Virgo or with Lilith, she's far from Earth. And when the moon's far from Earth, she appears too small to occult the entire sun disk. So there was an annular solar eclipse like 11 days before your birth,
Right.
and a total lunar eclipse like 4 days after your birth.
Wow.
Like, don't quote me on that, go look, but I'm
Yeah.
pretty
I'm gonna
sure
do
that's
so
true.
much research after we finish recording. I'll be like, right, let's dive in even further. You talk about rabbit holes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then,
But
we
no.
had that Regulus eclipse in 2017. Um, so
Yeah,
that would have been a Metonic. Did you turn 38 that year? When were you
did I?
born?
The 79. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, so that would
38,
have
yes.
been your Metonic return where we would see the lunar return during your solar return, right? So sun, moon, earth by phase. And that means that that prenatal eclipse point of yours, which is literally on the heart of the lion, was eclipsed when you were 19 and then again when you were 38. Those don't last forever. Like there can only be 4 or 5 eclipses in what I call a Metonic string.
Yeah.
But I have to imagine that was a really significant time for you.
You
Um,
know what? I actually, the strongest memory I've just had is those two periods of age. I literally focused on my health. I lost excess weight. I became fit at both those age points where it was very much determination, right, I'm going to do this. And that's what just came to my mind. It was 19, first time I did that. Then 38. I just wasn't feeling good within myself. Talk about Virgo, just the healthy body and mind. And it was 38 where I just did a month total detox and it all went. And it was around 38. They're the two things that have just come to mind in terms of my physical being, but it was more to do with my um kind of inner world, not just the outer
mm,
physical look, but how I was feeling within. And it had a lot to do with what I was consuming, a lot of food, what I was reading, who I was around, surrounding myself with. And it was a lot more of the inner journey. And as you can see, I have a jam-packed 12th house.
totally.
Um,
And the nodes, right? Like I have node
yes.
612 as well, but the other way. I have my north node in the sixth.
Yeah.
Anyway, as soon as
Yeah.
somebody says, look, Venus can join Pluto in secondary progressions, I'm like, well, let's talk about y'all instead. Um,
Yeah. I see
Which
how
we
you
just
did
did.
that.
mhm.
Yes.
So let's go. Let's see.
Enough about us, Sue.
Yeah, enough about us. So let's see. Let's go back. And
Look at transits.
yeah, so this brings us up to
V.
today.
Yeah.
And so we can see kind of what you were talking about. And we didn't even I didn't even we didn't even go to the goddesses, the Hecate,
Mhm.
Inanna, and Isis, but I just
Isis.
noticed that they were conjunct, just certain points. I mean, like that Hecate is conjunct your Mercury.
Mhm.
And I just thought that was so fitting of how you're, holding the lantern for other people.
Healing. Yeah. Yeah. And for me, it's Isis on the South Node, in Taurus in the 12th house. I'm doing a lot of research at the minute, Gemini, to do with the Isis, the goddess Isis, and what she represents and even in the
What are you
birth chart.
finding?
A lot to do with, of course, she's presented as alchemy, magic, resurrection, but just in terms of how she's the lineage of the high priestess of Isis is reawakening of the divine feminine within consciousness. So that's the kind of rabbit hole I'm down. And with her in
And are
your
you
South Node,
studying Osiris simultaneously?
Mhm.
I am, but though the focus is more Isis, I am bringing Osiris's asteroid into play as well. But because for my own journey in the last year, 18 months, it's been very much about connecting to Isis. And I realized, in EA, we do skip steps. She was actually a skip step alongside my Neptune, which Isis is opposing my Neptune, actually. And it was only when I'd gone to Egypt that it all came to the forefront for me. And you
Mm.
talk about sacred lands. So I was wanting to know if you've had any connections with Egypt, if you've been there and anything's kind of been awakened within you.
Yeah, for sure. I'm a total pyramidiot. Um, and was kind of deep and still am into ancient civilizations
Me
and
too.
stone circles and,
Mm.
you know, rumors and whispers of Atlantis. And like, so I came to some of the sacred astronomical cycles, like the turning of the ages through the precession of the equinoxes, before I came to astrology. Um,
Sure.
and yeah, you know, a lot of those roads lead to Kemet. So I was fortunate enough to visit Egypt. It was actually, I was in the Great Pyramid on 9/11 in 2019, um, and got to spend a couple weeks then also touring Upper Egypt and spending some
Mm.
time on the Nile and Karnak and Luxor. And
Yeah.
I went to the Temple of Isis, which you know has been moved,
I went there
because the
too. Yeah, yeah.
island where it initially was sunk under the Nile when the dam was put in, right? Like that's kind of an
Yes.
intriguing thing. There was one
That's
of the temples was moved to New York, right? The Temple of Hathor is in the Met in New York City, which is intriguing, right? Um,
hmm.
but yeah, I mean, the Temple of Hathor, like in Dendera, certainly spoke to me.
Mm.
And that time in Egypt was very important for me. My ascendant um, points right to the Great Pyramid,
Okay.
which is like the ascendant. People teach it like it's east, but it's not. So Gemini ascends well north of east. And if you trace the direction of my ascendant from my birthplace, so this would be like a local space line of the ascendant degree, it points like literally right to the vertex of the Great Pyramid.
Wow.
So I've
Oh,
been
wow.
drawn there tons, and I speak about Asur and well, I'll use those names, Osiris and Isis, a lot. And
Okay.
actually, I believe our sun was born in the Orion Nebula, which astronomers of our day would like smack me for saying, but it is, they say, the nebula, the birthplace of stars, that's closest to Earth. They just don't believe it's old enough to be like the birthplace of our sun. But I think our star, and I'm not the first to say this, other stars in our family like Sirius and the Pleiades and others, like all like come out of that place. And I think it's shown in the mystery traditions, like the geometry of the Great Pyramids of Giza, which by the way, it's like that Orion Belt geometry, which Robert Paval kind of first brought awareness to in modern times. It's also encoded in Washington, D.C.,
Hmm.
which has been a lot of my work has been kind of cracking the star codes and the monuments and the temples and the art of
Yeah.
DC. So yeah, I'm a total Egyptile. I'm a big fan. Egyptophile, I guess I should say. And an Egyptile because I'm an infant in it.
Me too. But that's the one thing I noticed when I looked at in your chart and I was like, interesting. That shows me that there's been a past interest reawakened and yeah, and the choice is whether we choose to dive into it further or not. But yeah, literally on a similar kind of trajectory, I would say. I was just showing Sue earlier that it was a couple of years ago that I came across Quidrid this particular book
Yeah.
and it came to me very synchronistically, and it's opened up a whole different world of understanding about the sacredness that we're surrounded by. We're just not taught about it, right? We talk
Yeah.
about this like the schooling system that we go through, just that control mechanism, and
My
there has to
students are
come.
taught about it, but yeah, that book, you know, which is, by the way, the Wooden books, the book
Yeah.
Quadrivium. It's actually a compilation of six of their
Yes.
wonderful books, and they have gazillions of wonderful books. Like one of the books in there, which really every star student should have, is the Little Book of Coincidences in the Solar System by John Martineau, who is the editor
Yeah.
for the Wooden book series. There's going to be an astrology book in their series coming out.
That will be my bed. I'll be reading that before bed tonight then. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
it's
no,
not
it's
out
it's a
yet,
great.
but
It's
it's
if
coming,
anyone's
I think.
interested. Yeah.
And
No,
it's
yeah,
called
that was interesting.
the book is
This
called
one, Quadrivium.
Quadrivium. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
The wooden books. I'll send it to you so you've got the details for the
yeah,
for the description.
yeah.
But yeah, I
We'll
know we
put
have to wrap up soon.
yeah. I
Yeah.
know you've got a few more minutes, right, Gemini?
Yeah, I've got
Yeah.
12, a number we
Okay.
Well,
astrologers love.
12. That's cool. That's cool. Well, before Sue goes to her favorite question, my favorite question is always to do with books. Just any books that you feel the audience can look into, that a book that's inspired you in your own life, in your own journey, apart from astrology books that you would recommend that
Mm.
people go read.
Well, so there are a few books in that wooden book series
Yes.
that I really highly recommend. Those books are great because they're tiny and they're huge. One is
Yes.
called Sun, Moon, and Earth by Robin Heath.
Hmm.
Another is called The Mayan and Other Ancient Calendar Systems by Jeff Stray. A Little Book of Coincidences in the Solar System by John Martineau, which is one of the books that's included in that Quadrivium Compendium. Like those are or compilation.
Yes,
Those are
yeah.
great. Um, The Alchemist,
Hmm.
I feel like is a good book to read regularly. Of that, of course,
Yeah.
that's by uh, Paulo Coelho.
Hmm.
Um, Sirens of Titan by Kurt Vonnegut is,
Oh,
I think, a really telling and amazing book, especially for our day and age. Um, I mean, I'd say right now people should be reading 1984 regularly
right.
as well, but that one's a bit of a harder pill to swallow. So the Sirens of Titan will do the job, but from in a sense, gentler, more mysterious, mythic, wonderful, hilarious Vonnegut way. Love that's like those two, that book and The Alchemist are probably my favorite books.
Yeah.
For those who are kind of coming into the mystery traditions, I do really highly encourage play with number. Like I'm always having my students count spokes on hubcaps and things like that, and play with old Pythagorean instruments and yada yada. Um, there's a really fun book that's called A Beginner's Guide to Creating the Universe by Michael S. Schneider. Let me confirm that name because there's another book of a similar title that's not this one. Let me see. Yeah, Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe, Michael S. Schneider, Archetypes of Nature, Art, and Science. That book is amazing. He
Wow.
just goes
Okay.
through like this is one, this is where we see oneness in nature, this is two. And then he has these wonderful quotes from mystics and teachers throughout time and space, throughout like global cultures and history. Um, that help kind of fuel the journey. It's cool. I haven't done them yet, but I also got like he has a series of workbooks that he was selling with that book some time ago that have different kind of sacred geometry practices.
Wow.
And then it turns out he teaches, or at least did teach, at the college where my partner was studying. She
Oh,
went for fashion design, but he's like a design teacher there as well. So highly recommend. Like that's one maybe y'all haven't out there heard of yet. That's like go grab that, A Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe by Michael Schneider.
right.
Awesome.
I'll be getting that then.
Right on.
Wow, we got my head is swimming. And when that happens, the words don't come out. But um, we got to so many topics, and there were so many going through my head that I couldn't keep up. But this has been so much fun. So my wrap up question is usually that I usually ask is, what do you do in your spare time?
Well, I have a 1-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
So I don't have spare time.
Yeah.
But actually, what I do in my spare time is be with Maya. And I do have some spare time. So right now, I'm really trying to deepen into my own musicality.
Mm.
In Constellations, which is my school's membership community, we're kind of taking a really slow orbit of the planets over the course of a year. So Anna, Scorpion, my partner, and I are doing this together. And so we did a month with the sun and a month with the moon, and now we're doing a month with the lunar nodes. Like these archetypes presented to me in like 3 days of a retreat, and like I'm like, well, let's go the opposite way. Like, what if we just really focus on the sun for a month? But I'm also along the way, like bringing people through some sacred geometry practices. Like with the sun, we did 1 circle, and with the moon month, we did 2, and the Vesica, and now we're talking 3ness because it's nodes month. So you get the dark side and some other things that are happening here. But I'm also bringing people through the harmonic series. So the 1 is like the root, and the 2 is the octave, and the 3 is the musical fifth. And the way that those come through, you'll find some of that stuff in that Quadrivium text, Rob. And I don't like sing well. So to like try to present this material, actually, I'll show you. I manifested this the other day, like literally taught a class about this stuff, and then we were walking in this new neighborhood where we just moved, and like there's lots of stuff out for free on the streets here, and this is from a girl called Rosa Lauren, which is a 2-string monochord. Like which really like it's a beautiful way to show the harmonic series, which I like showing in teaching harmonic astrology as well. So one of the things I'm doing in my spare time is like trying to crack the cosmic code of harmony and to open my voice. So like I'll walk around with the dog and the baby strapped to my chest and working on my do re mi fa sol la ti do, and I'm practicing at the piano right now. So for the things that's like outside of work, like I'm creating a series of kind of self-initiatory practices for astrologers to like integrate astronomy. That I don't know when that's going to see the light of the day, but that's happening. There's like a lot of things that are happening in the astronomy world and teaching and doing consultations. But in my own free time, besides watching my daughter grow and being in the initiatory temple called Learning How to Become a Father, it's like music right now.
Awesome. And so, okay, so just to clarify, you have training courses that you offer to students?
Right now, yeah, I mean, there's a few things at GeminiBrett.com, and but I'm also in the lab right now creating a whole new approach to how I teach astronomy to astrologers. I'm wanting to eventually have practices you can do every day, and including when it's cloudy out. Which are, like I became a sky guy while I was living in Seattle, talking to a woman who's in England right now, right? Like there's going to be plenty of days when you can't see the stars or you can't even see the sun. So what do you do then?
Trust me, today you can. I'm roasting in the heat wave.
It seems like it. Yeah.
So if you ever want to give a talk for EA Zoom meetings about that, we would absolutely love to have you do it once you get it all.
Yeah, right on. It might be fun to come talk primary directions and twins sometime.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Rob,
anytime.
Let's just do, I got 2 minutes left. Let me cast your chart, Rob. What's your birth date?
Oh wait, let's do that. Let's do that off
okay.
Off camera. Cool. So we don't show data.
But this actually this.
Well, you just put the chart in the screen. I could get the data.
But there's no data.
Yeah,
you're right. But there's no data. But I think this is a great place to kind of end, because this is like watch this space for when we do this recording for next time.
Stay
But
tuned for next time.
yes,
Yeah,
yes, for
absolutely.
sure.
All right, bye, y'all. Thanks for
Thank
having me
you.
on. Thanks for everybody here for joining the journey. Hopefully, you had a laugh or two along the way.
Oh, absolutely. And we'll
Thank you, Gemini.
we'll see you next time.
All right,
Yeah.
bye, y'all.